Okay, great. We're going to get started, everyone. It's a very powerful microphone. Great. Thank you all for being here today. I'm Heather Park, and I'm representing the U.S. Rare Disease Organization at Sanofi, where I lead the East Coast business of our rare disease organization. And for more than 40 years, Sanofi has been deeply committed to the rare disease community, and we continue to chase those miracles of science, looking for ways to improve patient lives and develop disease medicines. I would like to thank our Congressional Caucus co-chairs for their support, albeit they're not here today, Senator Amy Klobuchar, as well as Representative Gus Bilirakis. And a special thanks to the rare disease community of supporters for this caucus briefing as well. I can't overstate enough the critical importance and far-reaching impact timely diagnosis of rare disease has through both the national and state newborn screening programs. From my experience managing our patient services program at Sanofi for the rare disease team, I've seen firsthand how many obstacles patients are faced and that can delay or even prevent a diagnosis and getting the care and treatment that they need. Policies like the newborn screening program, which can lead to an early and accurate diagnosis, have the power to save lives of patients and save families years of uncertainty, emotional stress, as well as unnecessary medical costs. These policies are not only life-changing, but they're a smart investment in our healthcare system. Newborn screening is one of the most successful public health policies and programs that we have in the United States, and the results, they speak for themselves. For Sanofi, for example, where we are active, we've seen clear benefits from the policies that support MPS 1 and Pompe. These were added to the federal recommended uniform screening panel in 2015 and 2016, respectively. And today, nearly every newborn in this country is screened for these conditions. However, in contrast, if those conditions are not included in the RUSP, only a handful of states will be screening these patients, leaving babies and families without a timely diagnosis, and that can lead to significant long-term health outcome challenges. The National Academy's Newborn Screening in the United States, a vision for sustaining and advancing excellence, was recently released, and our speaker, Dr. Beth Tarini, will present these findings in her presentation, and our distinguished panel will discuss the importance of the future of newborn screening. And I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Dylan Simon. So currently, Dylan serves as the Senior Director of Policy at Every Life Foundation for Rare Disease. And since joining Every Life Foundation, he has focused on newborn screening and diagnostic policy issues, as well as annual appropriation efforts for the rare disease community. Dylan's work includes leadership with the community on the passage of landmark state legislation, providing for expedient implementation of the RUSP conditions. Prior to joining Every Life, Dylan interned at the Senate Help Committee and has worked in several advocacy organizations. So please welcome Dylan.
Thank you everyone for being here today, and as always, a big thank you to our caucus co-chairs who are all such fantastic leaders in this space. Before we get started, I do want to talk a little bit about newborn screening and just kind of the importance to newborn screening. It is often considered one of the most successful public health programs in the United States, and that really comes from the ability to detect life-threatening diseases at a time when you can provide life-saving diagnoses. And that's really at the core of newborn screening, is providing that timely diagnosis for conditions where we know timely treatment, timely access to treatment can really make a huge difference in the lives of so many newborns and families across the country. And newborn screening has been able to save thousands of lives, and moving forward can help save tens of thousands more lives if the system can help grow and help meet the moment. And we really are at an interesting moment within newborn screening. We see a lot of growing therapies available within the rare disease space, which is a key part of newborn screening. We see a lot of interesting and new developments within genomic sequencing technologies that could have an impact on newborn screening. How will have an impact is still very much up for discussion. How that can be included is a very interesting conversation. And so we see a lot of the science around rare disease and newborn screening really starting to accelerate and provide an opportunity to grow newborn screening. And that comes at really fantastic timing, as I referenced in terms of the National Academy report that came out, that Dr. Trini will speak more about, that looks at how to modernize newborn screening. It has been one of the most successful public health programs in this country, but we also know that these programs need to grow alongside the science. And if we can't make those improvements to ensure the fact that this program can work successfully, that we are not losing individuals through newborn screening programs, that the treatment is there, that the technology is there, that the education and follow-up is there, we have a risk of missing the moment, of ensuring the fact that we let newborn screening fall from being the most successful public health programs to where it had been previously, where it was a fantastic program, but you saw a lot of disparities across the country. And so we want to make sure that we're continuing to grow, continuing to move forward. But unfortunately, part of the reason we're also at an interesting moment with the newborn screening is because we're starting to see some of the federal leadership in this space falter, whether it is the termination of the ACHDNC, which helps to oversee the Russell review process, or proposed cuts to federal newborn screening programs. We know we need federal leadership in this space, and we know that it plays a huge role in signaling to the states, here's what you can do. States do, at the end of the day, have the final decision on a lot of these aspects. But the federal government and federal advisory committees can play a huge role in saying, here's what you should be doing. Here's what newborn screening can be across the country. And we're really excited because we think here is that moment to stand up and say, newborn screening is vital to this country, is vital to the lives of so many newborns, and provide that diagnosis. And we can take some of the report, also take conversations that have been occurring with the newborn screening for years before the report, and really move it forward to ensure the fact that we can protect, expand, and restore this newborn screening program, and ensure the fact that it expands to meet the moment and will continue to grow alongside all the science within newborn screening. And so again, I thank you so much for being here today, and also want to take a moment. We have one of our rare disease caucus chairs, Senator Klobuchar, who has a few words she would like to say.
Newborn screening briefing hosted by the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus. Thank you to the team at the Every Life Foundation for Rare Diseases for organizing the briefing. No matter where you're coming from, thank you for being here today. My fellow co-chairs of our caucus and I are lucky to have so many strong partners in the fight against rare diseases. We're here because we are all committed to ensuring that every baby, no matter where they're born, gets the most comprehensive newborn screenings possible. Newborn screening is one of the most successful, cost-effective public health programs in the country. It saves lives. It's especially important because we all know 70% of rare conditions start in early childhood, and screening can identify a condition before it becomes observable to patients or clinicians, giving that child a better chance of living a healthier life. Working with so many of you, we've made enormous strides toward empowering the families of babies born with certain conditions to get an early diagnosis so they can have the best chance to start treatment, improve healthcare outcomes, and reduce healthcare costs. But there's a lot more we can and must do. Like all of you, I'm focused on innovating and strengthening the newborn screening program, as well as reinstating the federal panel that advises states and approves new screening tests. And I see my state as a great example. In Minnesota, we offer one of the most comprehensive newborn screening programs in the country. I don't want us to be an outlier. Every state should have the infrastructure to make sure that we have early detection and diagnosis. It can be the difference between your child being subject to years of unnecessary tests searching for answers and getting the best evidence-based care from the beginning. But comprehensive newborn screening is only the first step. If a condition is found, we need to ensure children have access to the best treatment available. We know that for rare conditions, often only one or two pediatric providers in the country are specialized enough to care for them. That's why I'm working across the aisle and across the Capitol to simplify kids with rare diseases' ability to be treated without delay by a Medicaid provider outside of their home state. because kids with rare conditions shouldn't have to wait to get the care they need. In addition to improving screenings and care, I'm focused on maintaining federal funding and staffing for rare disease research and drug review. I'm pushing back against attacks on rare disease scientists and federal funding for medical research. These cuts have led to canceled clinical trials and entire lines of stem cells being destroyed by sudden stop work orders. Every time we cancel a trial or study, we're canceling an opportunity to discover better detection tools, better treatments, better cures. And we know that these investments are great for our economy as well as for health. Every dollar of NIH funding creates $2.64 of economic activity. With all the progress we are made with gene mapping, research trials, and AI, we are truly at the cusp of groundbreaking developments when it comes to treating and curing rare diseases. So now is not the time to move backwards, it is the time to move forwards. We've made some amazing progress thanks to years of federal investment in public health and science. Rare disorders from Prader-Willi to sickle cell to Fragile X have FDA-approved treatments for the first time. And this past week we saw a newborn with an ultra-rare, usually fatal condition healed through gene support by NIH investment. There is reason for hope, but it's clear we have a lot of work to do together, because everyone, no matter how young and no matter how rare their condition, deserves a chance. Thanks everyone. Keep up the life-changing work. You're going to save lives.
Sure. Thank you again to Senator Klobuchar for her consistent leadership on this issue. And with that, we will jump into our fantastic speakers. We're really excited to have such a fantastic set of panelists today who can really speak to the importance of newborn screening. And so to start us off, I would like to introduce Dr. Amy Brower. Dr. Brower is a clinical professor at Creighton University School of Medicine in Omaha, Nebraska, leading a research program focusing on advancing tools, technologies, and policies in genomic medicine, rare disease, and newborn screening. From 2008 to 2024, she was the principal investigator of the Newborn Screening Translational Research Network as part of the Eunice Cantor Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development Hunter Kelly Newborn Screening Research Program at the American College of Medical Genetics and Genomics. Dr. Brower's son was born with severe combined immunodeficiency disorder, or SCID, immune deficiency, SCID, the first condition added to the RUSP, and this personal experience has driven her lifelong dedication to expanding newborn screening programs, improving early diagnosis, and ensuring that families have access to the care and support they need. And with that, Dr. Brower.
Thank you, Dylan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Dylan said, I've been fortunate to spend the last few decades at the intersection between science, public health, and policy. And as a parent, I think I bring a unique perspective. So newborn screening in the United States is an amazing program. It's offered across 56 states and territories. And at the federal level, there's a recommended uniform screening panel that guides the states on which conditions to screen for. As a geneticist, there's 10,000 conditions that potentially could be candidates for newborn screening. And today there's a recommended 38 that are the core. But that equates to every day 10,000 newborns are screened sort of in this silent program that just happens without any of us flipping a switch or touching a button. And that leads to 10 to 20 to 40 newborns being diagnosed with a severe urgent condition every day and entering into the chance for a full life and for lifelong care. Newborn screening is not just a test. It's this ecosystem of a multi-component, multi-stakeholder system that begins with screening, but quickly leads to treatment and clinical care and a lifetime of benefits for the individual that's screened and for the family. So although it begins across this patchwork of states and state laboratories and newborn hospitals, the handoff happens very quickly to clinicians and to specialists for each of these conditions. Again, as a geneticist, when I first got into newborn screening, I was blown away by the variety of conditions. You could spend your whole career just investigating one of these diseases, but these amazing public health teams screen for these many, many conditions every single day, and they handle the complexity just like it's amazing. So the goal here is to have happy, functioning adults. And through this system, that's what we see across the board, from small communities to the largest cities in the United States. We're touching so many lives through this amazing system of newborn screening. And so, as I said before, it's a system, and hopefully it begins prenatally. So there's a lot of work to talk to expectant parents and families about what can be expected in those hours after birth, when we're beginning to either do hearing testing or testing a baby's heart or collecting a blood sample for testing many, many different conditions. But as I said, for the individuals that get a diagnosis, the handoff and the goal is quickly to go to clinicians and to go to community-based systems, so that most of these conditions are not curable, they're treatable, but we are saving lives. So these newborns enter into a lifetime of care and management. And so these families need support, and these individuals need support throughout the lifetime. Newborn screening, oh boy, 60 years, it has seen the changes, and it's a great barometer of new technologies. You heard from the introduction, what a wonderful opportunity for pharma and inventing new ways to do gene therapies and to deliver on treatments. But it's also an area for innovation in molecular technologies. I spent over a decade in biotech inventing new ways to discover cystic fibrosis, and the kit that I helped develop is actually part of newborn screening today. So just this wealth of opportunity to go from one condition, PKU, in the 1960s to now over 40 conditions in 2000s, and we're on the cusp of potentially thousands of more conditions. And so Dylan alluded to this Federal Advisory Committee. 20 years ago, our then Secretary of HHS, Tommy Thompson, was my governor. We lived in Wisconsin at the time, and in the Bush administration, he invited me to apply to be on this Federal Advisory Committee. And I was brand new, but I was on the inaugural sort of first 5 years of this Federal Advisory Committee on Newborns and Children, and our first job was to come up with an evidence-based system to how do we go from just a handful of conditions using the best in science and the best evidence to add conditions to the uniform panel. And what we did in those first 5 years was to come up with this matrix to figure out of all the conditions, what should we be screening for. And these are just screenshots of the different conditions that have been added to this recommended uniform panel. But one of them, the very first one, as in my introduction alluded to, is pretty special to me. So this is known often as David the Bubble Boy disease, or the Bubble Boy disease, because when it was first discovered, and what we could do is this little boy born without an immune system was put into a bubble. And my first baby was born with the same condition, same gene, same mutation as David the Bubble Boy. And we entered, there wasn't newborn screening at the time, but we entered into a year-long stint at the University of Minnesota for an unrelated transplant. And our story has a happy ending, but what a lucky happenstance that I was on a Federal Advisory Committee, and at the first meeting was his immunologist telling me how SCID is a pediatric emergency and needed to be part of the uniform screening panel. So for my son, who spent a year in the hospital and got a treatment that partially worked, today's newborns across the United States get screened shortly after birth. They don't have infections, they go right into therapy, and they live without having any treatment at all for the majority of them. So it's an amazing story. So as a scientist, and as you heard, I spent 15 years running a national program changing discoveries and then communicating those discoveries from our work at NIH to this Federal Advisory Committee, then to this recommended uniform screening panel, then to this patchwork of states where we're touching 10,000 newborns a day. That was an incredible system. And unfortunately, it's gone away. So the next speakers that you'll hear from are from families that are really advocating for a very timely we need that Federal Advisory Committee back, and we need your help in protecting and restoring the newborn screening federal infrastructure because it played such a critical role in saving newborns' lives across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brower, for that fantastic presentation and all for your lifelong work in this space. Oh, I went too far. Next, we'll have Lisa Brackville. Lisa Brackville is a wife, mother, author, and advocate. She became involved with newborn screening advocacy when their daughter, Victoria, was diagnosed with Krabbe disease in 2015. Lisa worked for 5 years to reform the newborn screening programs in Pennsylvania by changing 2 laws, making the program one of the strongest in the country. As a result of her efforts, Pennsylvania began screening for Krabbe in 2021. I will also say Pennsylvania is one of only 2 states that screens for all 38 core breast conditions. Lisa serves on the board of directors for Krabbe Connect and is the associate director of advocacy for patient advocacy strategies. Lisa?
Good afternoon. I have been a rare disease and newborn screening advocate for 10 years. Like so many of my fellow advocates, my family and I have chosen to turn our tragedy into triumph for others because of our great loss. It is an honor to share today about this collective burden of a lack of access to treatment for serious and often terminal rare conditions on behalf of my family and those who have endured similar paths. My husband and I both say that Friday, February 13th, 2015 was the worst day of our lives. We returned home the night before after a 5-day hospital stay with our daughter, Victoria, after being told to expect results in 2 weeks. So when we received a call saying that we needed to come in that afternoon, we felt a sense of doom. It had been 6 weeks since our daughter, Tori, suddenly became symptomatic with something terrible. 6 weeks of searching for answers, with bad news arriving with every test performed. So the fact that they had an answer that required an immediate in-person delivery made us wary. We were ushered into a typical exam room with beige walls intended to soothe, but even that couldn't calm our anxiety that day. We held our daughter while we waited for the neurologist to come in. When she did, we immediately knew the news wasn't good because we could see it in her eyes. She shook our hands and gently said the 2 most terrible words we could have heard. It's Krabbe. 1 week prior, right before Tori was admitted to the hospital, we learned that she had a form of leukodystrophy. Against the neurologist's wishes, we had Googled the term and saw a list of subtypes. We had seen Krabbe on that list and we knew that it was a death sentence. Dying is not a word that should describe anyone's 6-month-old child. She told us 3 things that day. 1, our 6-month-old daughter had Krabbe disease and was dying. 2, there was nothing we could do. And when we pressed her on that, pleading for anything, something that we could try, she said the words that haunt me to this day. If you had caught it at birth, you could have treated it. Caught it at birth? She briefly explained newborn screening and the access to treatment it provides, but noted that not all states screen for the same conditions. In that moment, it became clear that advocacy was always supposed to be my story, my life's work. Everything leading up to this moment, my political science degree, lobbying experience, finally became clear. I was supposed to effect change, to build her legacy. And I eventually came to accept that the loss of my daughter would result in the saving of countless others through newborn screening and early access to treatment. I had a moral imperative to advocate. Despite this tragic news, my husband and I decided that we were going to live with Tori while she was still with us, and we completed 50 bucket list items with her. Of course, we also had to learn to be her caregivers and her nurses, add a great deal of medical equipment and knowledge to our home, and provide round-the-clock care without the help of a home health nurse, but we did it. We had so many adventures and chose joy during a time when it would have been easier to choose grief. And the time for grief would come. Tori died 14 months later at just 20 months old. That grief is what fuels the work that I and so many of us do. 3 weeks after her death, I began my advocacy journey. I attended a meeting of the Pennsylvania Newborn Screening Advisory Board, and I began to learn everything that I could about newborn screening, how it worked in Pennsylvania, and what I would need to do to make an impact. 3 bill attempts and 5 years later, I succeeded in reforming the newborn screening program with Act 133 of 2020. Because of my advocacy, the advisory board chose to begin screening for Krabbe disease in May of 2021. 2 months later, on Tori's birthday, identical twins were born. A week later, they were diagnosed with Krabbe disease because of newborn screening. They were the first 2 to receive gene therapy for Krabbe, and it's all because of Tori. It feels like redemption. Last year, I was involved in the process of seeing Krabbe disease added to the federal recommended uniform screening panel, a list that was created to increase uniformity between states for those born with rare treatable conditions. I watched as we worked through the process, as the ACHDNC demonstrated a willingness to work with the rare community to improve the process. And now I'm watching as what little we had has been taken from us. It shouldn't be this hard to save the lives of children. But something that I've observed along the way is that our country, our government, actively chooses to make it this hard. Rare disease advocacy is often met with roadblocks, goalposts being moved, and partisanship creating problems that shouldn't exist. Problems like the lack of a process for adding new conditions because the committee was disbanded to save money. Perhaps it's easier to ignore that children are dying from treatable rare conditions than it is to put partisanship aside and save the problems at hand. The loss of the ACHDNC has been a devastating blow to the rare disease community. While it wasn't a perfect pathway, it was something. It gave advocates a roadmap to follow for an evidence-based decision, not a legislative one. Most importantly, though, it empowered us in the face of great loss. And without it, we are left feeling powerless once more. I have experienced the powerlessness that comes from receiving a diagnosis with despair, a diagnosis received too late for action. But I've also experienced empowerment by being able to help prevent that future for babies born in Pennsylvania and beyond, and the ACHDNC was the catalyst for those efforts. Today, I teach advocates 8 essential components for effective advocacy. Be willing to learn and respect expertise, listen to understand, operate ethically, communicate well and often, work flexibly and collaboratively, and give credit where it's due. Taking action is a given. I advise them to embrace humility in their advocacy, communication, and lives as they work toward changing the newborn screening system. However, advocacy only works when both sides are willing. And what we are experiencing now from the federal government is the direct opposite of those 8 components. Even worse, we are watching the erosion of morality and ethics as diagnostic pathways for treatment-eligible newborns are being decimated. Access to treatment is being denied. Congress speaks in terms of dollars saved, but the ultimate cost of these decisions is the lives of children. Children like my Victoria. Krabbe disease stole so much from Tori and from us. It stole her smile, her voice, her big, beautiful eyes, and ultimately her life. My husband will never be able to dance with his daughter at her wedding, something that still makes him emotional at weddings that we attend. Our twins ask where baby Tori is, forcing us to have an impossible conversation with her brothers who never had the opportunity to meet her. Now she is represented in photos with the giraffe, but it shouldn't be this way. She should be here today. We couldn't save Tori, but advocating to provide access to early diagnosis and treatment gives us some peace because we are giving parents something that was taken from us, the opportunity to try to save our child's life. And as members of Congress, you have power to make that possible for many. Because no parent should ever have to bury their child, especially not when newborn screening would have allowed them to try to save their child's life. We want parents to receive their child's diagnosis with hope, and that's what newborn screening offers. To conclude, the depth of my love for my daughter is not measured by the number of tears that I have cried, but rather by the life I choose to live in her absence. And I choose to be relentless in advocacy, ensuring that newborn screening saves as many lives as possible. And it's all for Tori. But we cannot accomplish this goal without the help of Congress, and inaction is not an option.
Thank you, Lisa, for a fantastic presentation and your story, and for your tireless advocacy that I've had the experience of working with, and it's always a pleasure. Our next speaker is also a wonderful advocate in her own right. In 2012, after Maria Kafalis' youngest daughter, Calliope, was diagnosed with metachromatic leukodystrophy, or MLD, she became an advocate for rare disease and gene therapy. Her foundation, the Calliope Joy Foundation, helped launch the Leukodystrophy Center of Excellence at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Over the last decade, Maria has worked closely with the FDA, NIH, and NORD. She has published pieces in Slate, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and Stat, and her work was featured on CBS Sunday Morning with Jay and Pauley. In her 2021 memoir, Harnessing Grief, published by the Beacon Press, was inspired by her rare disease advocacy. This month, she co-sponsored MLD on the Hill, a coalition of advocates demanding the reinstatement of federal newborn screening. Maria?
Can I get my one slide?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, look at all that picture. My goodness. Oh, here it is. It is wonderful to be on the Hill. Can you guys hear me? It is wonderful to be on the Hill. I was just here last week. I feel like I should get an apartment here. On May 9th, the ACHDNC was set to take a vote on the scientific review for the inclusion of metachromatic leukodystrophy, or MLD, for its inclusion on the RUSP. But then in April, we got word that the ACHDNC had been disbanded. We had no reason to believe the federal authorities were targeting the scientific review process per se. We believe that the program was simply swept away as part of Trump administration, as part of the Trump administration's efforts to restructure HHS. A year earlier, on March 18th, 2024, 6 days before the second anniversary of my daughter Cal's death, it was an amazing, beautiful, and heartbreaking day. MLD joined the ranks of the 5% of rare diseases with an FDA-approved therapy. Lenmeldy, if you haven't heard of it, is one of the safest and most durable and most transformative gene therapies on the market. Within weeks of FDA approval, the MLD community submitted our package to the ACHDNC for MLD's inclusion on the RUSP. The oldest U.S. patient had been treated with Lenmeldy during the clinical trial phase in 2011. Giovanni Price is now 15 years old. He was 1 year old when he was treated. He is 6 feet tall. He plays basketball. He loves soccer and computer games and his cat. His mom says he's kind of a pain in the neck, but he's really beautiful and perfect. His teachers and classmates have no idea that he should have died by his 10th birthday after becoming paralyzed, nonverbal, and feeding tube dependent. When Giovanni testified to the ACHDNC, and some of you were in that room that day that happened, last August, the members of the committee were so astounded to see a teenage boy with MLD standing before them. The committee's chair adjourned the meeting for 5 minutes for the people in the room, there in the Eunice Kennedy Shriver conference room, to compose themselves because they had seen something they had never imagined they would see. A child with MLD standing before them and testifying on behalf of MLD's inclusion in newborn screening. But honestly, Giovanni's testimony was just the cherry on top of a decade-long effort. A team of genetic counselors, geneticists, biochemicists, bioethicists, neurologists, and transplanters had published 6 papers establishing the transformative power of MLD's gene therapy and demonstrating the efficacy of MLD newborn screening as a newborn screening population-wide test. In the EU, newborn screening had already identified 4 children with no false positives. We felt confident that decades of work, millions of dollars in research money, and our time and patience would finally result in MLD's inclusion in the RUSP. We had worked so very hard for this, and we had confidence that the science was going to back us up. But there was also a compelling moral imperative behind MLD's inclusion on the RUSP. Gene therapy for MLD can do more than cure children. It actually prevents children from ever getting sick. But since MLD moves so quickly and nothing can reverse damage to the brain and central nervous system, MLD children must be diagnosed and treated by 6 months of age. Simply put, without newborn screening, it is nearly impossible to save the life of a child with MLD. So you might be wondering about Giovanni. Giovanni had only been treated because of his older sister's Liviana's diagnosis at age 2. You see, Giovanni's medical miracle had come at a terrible price, a biblical sacrifice. In a world without newborn screening, MLD families must lose one child to save another. So 1 month ago, when we learned about the canceled vote, MLD parents had an insane idea. I will admit, I was probably the lead MLD parent behind this insane idea. And we called on families from MLD families from across the nation to come to DC and speak to legislators and HHS officials. What more could the parents possibly say? We had to believe that the children themselves who had received gene therapy coming to DC and teaching officials about the power of gene therapy would be more effective than reading a New England Journal of Medicine article. We knew how much Giovanni's testimony had left an impression on the ACHDNC. So here we all are, doing our congressional briefing. And there's, in the front, Giovanni, Cecilia, Celia Grace, Andrew, and Kira. You are looking at the living, breathing embodiment of that New England Journal of Medicine paper. That is medical history. I know everyone's been talking about KJ, our boy from CHOP, and actually that's one of our team at CHOP who did that amazing treatment. But these children are, and you can see Giovanni in the middle there, standing, towering over everyone. They had traveled from Colorado, Maryland, Alabama, and Arizona to fight for the future, to fight for newborn screening. They left school and home and their teams and their friends to speak to senators and aides and members of Congress. It was the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And so I'm here to amplify their voices once again, because it's really expensive to fly them in and out of DC. And Giovanni ate a lot while he was here. We in the MLD community are only asking for the ACHDNC to finish the scientific review that was supposed to happen. Then we would like them to take their vote, and we expected a very strong vote, positive vote from the committee, and we asked that Secretary Kennedy sign the letter recommending that MLD be included. After the children came to DC, the world changed. The moral calculus changed. When I lost my daughter, Cal, understanding that there was nothing the doctors or her dad could have done to save her kept me from drowning in my grief. Now our children's deaths are no longer a tragedy beyond our control. 50 children a year will die from MLD, 1 child a week. The people in this room, the people in this building have it in their power to change that future. We are holding you accountable, and the children are watching. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Maria, for that fantastic presentation, and you talk about fighting for the future, and I can speak. Watching you fight for the future of your community has always been a pleasure to watch. Next we have two fantastic speakers. Christopher and Jessica Curran are unwavering advocates for the Duchenne muscular dystrophy community. A mission sparked when their son Connor was diagnosed late at age 4. Each year, they visit Washington, D.C. to share their concerns and amplify the voices of families impacted by Duchenne. Their personal journey transformed grief into purpose and led them to found Kindness Over Muscular Dystrophy, a 501c3 charity dedicated to advancing research, providing benevolent support, and driving advocacy.
Hello. This is our son, Connor, as a baby. Like any mother, I never imagined that one day I'd be learning the grim statistic that 1 in 5,000 male births is affected by Duchenne muscular dystrophy. When Connor was diagnosed at age 4, that statistic became painfully personal to us. Duchenne muscular dystrophy, or DMD, is a devastating neuromuscular disorder that deprives its patients of function and unlimitedly their lives. This disease slowly robs children of the ability to use their muscles. Walking is the first to go. Then the child loses their ability to feed himself or even hug his parents, and then fatally ends in heart and lung failure in early adulthood. Initial signs of Duchenne are subtle, making timely diagnosis challenging. Babies and toddlers develop at different rates, and minor delays in milestones could be dismissed as normal variation. That was our reality. When we first noticed Connor's struggles with movement, we sought answers. I asked a friend of mine who's a physical therapist to please come to our house to check on Connor. But she thought he didn't seem that bad or that behind in his milestones. I was always questioning his motor function. Our pediatrician recommended physical therapy. But the exercises involved eccentric contractions, which are activities that require resistance, such as walking downhill or descending stairs. What we didn't know then was that these movements actually do more harm than good. These exercises accelerate muscle degeneration in DMD patients. Watching Connor struggle through these activities and fail to improve was both heartbreaking and deeply frustrating for us as parents. Months passed before we realized that something more serious was happening to Connor. Following advice from our pediatrician, we saw a developmental specialist, who then referred us to a neurologist. Only then, after years of uncertainty and unintentional harm, did we receive Connor's Duchenne diagnosis. The years we spent unknowingly damaging his muscles will haunt us forever. A simple Duchenne newborn screening test could have spared us that anguish, and more importantly, given Connor the earliest possible chance at an effective treatment. I wish I knew earlier, because it was 4 years of being unprepared and 4 years of damaging muscle that we could have been protecting, and 4 years of wondering what was wrong, because as a mom, I felt it and I knew it. I knew something was not right. I wish I knew sooner, because I will always remember Connor's little voice telling me at 2 and 3 and 4 years old, "Mom, I'm so tired. I need a rest. These stairs, they're too hard." And then I was saying, "Come on, Connor, let's keep going. It's good for your muscles. We're making them stronger." We pushed him further because we did not know. America must do better, and we can do better. Our story does not have to be repeated. No parent should endure the stress and helplessness of delayed diagnosis, nor should any child be unknowingly harmed and misguided by interventions. New medications exist now that can slow progression, but they're most effective when started before substantial muscle loss. Early diagnosis can change the trajectory of this disease and the quality of life for DMD patients like Connor and so many others. I am so grateful that my son can still hug me right now. I don't know how long that will last, but I do know that other families can have more time and longer-lasting hugs if only they know how to help their child. Please hear us. Please help us. When you know better, you do better. And we do know better. Thank you.
One year ago today, I testified before the Advisory Committee on Heritable Disorders in Newborns and Children, ACHDNC, advocating for Duchenne's inclusion in the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel, also known as the RUSP. After over a decade of tireless work by organizations like the MDA, Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy, and the Every Life Foundation, who are represented here today, the ACHDNC committee was finally scheduled to vote on the Duchenne nomination package. But then, out of the blue, the committee was dismantled. The vote never happened. This was a difficult and frustrating setback for those of us in the Duchenne community. The last thing we want to see DMD toddlers unintentionally injured and to miss out on timely, appropriate treatments. We would never want other parents to go through the enormous stress and worry that a delay in diagnosis brings. Jessica and I are here today to urge you to act decisively and urgently. With the dissolution of ACHDNC, we need a new regulatory pathway that allows Duchenne and other heritable conditions to be fairly considered for newborn screening protocols. We have a saying in the Duchenne community that time is muscle. With every passing day, kids with DMD lose precious strength and abilities. The longer we wait, the more irreversible damage is done. Please help all those babies out there that will be born with Duchenne and whose parents will have absolutely no awareness of that disease for years. We need you to create a pathway for Duchenne to be added to newborn screening panels so parents can avoid harmful interventions and capitalize on the hope offered in 8 FDA-approved Duchenne treatments, including gene therapy. These breakthroughs have the potential to slow muscle degeneration and improve quality of life, but only if patients receive an early diagnosis. Without newborn screening, many children will miss out on the critical treatment window when these interventions can have the greatest impact. The future of so many children depends on your action. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks so much for joining us today and for sharing your story and consistently sharing your story. In our last presentation today, Dr. Beth Tarini. Dr. Beth Tarini is a pediatrician and researcher whose work focuses on optimizing the delivery of services through newborn screening. Her research has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, Health Resources and Services Administration, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. A recognized national leader in newborn screening, Dr. Tarini has served on numerous federal, national, and state advisory committees. From 2016 to 2019, Dr. Tarini was an appointed member of the Advisory Committee for Heritable Disorders in Newborns and Children, which advises the Secretary of HHS on the adoption and implementation of newborn screening technologies, policies, and standards. Most recently, she served on the authorizing committee for the 2025 National Caucus Report, Newborn Screening in the United States, a vision for sustaining and advancing excellence. Dr. Tarini.
Good afternoon, members of the Rare Disease Caucus and guests. As a member of the committee that authored the recently released 2025 National Academy's report entitled Newborn Screening in the United States, a Vision for Sustaining and Advancing Excellence, I'm here today to present the key report recommendations that are pertinent to a national lens on newborn screening. And as I listen to our parents' stories, I wish I were here under better circumstances. Newborn screening is arguably one of the most successful public health programs in the United States. Nearly every infant born in the United States, that is 3.6 million babies, or 98% of those babies born in the United States receive newborn screening. That's a pretty high QI rate, okay? That's amazing. As you have heard, newborn screening plays a critical role in identifying infants who may be at risk for serious but treatable health conditions. And by detecting these conditions as early as possible, infants can be referred for diagnostic testing and care, and ultimately given the best possible chance at a healthy life. The impact of this screening is far-reaching. Each year, dried blood spot screening helps identify more than 7,000 infants who may benefit from timely intervention and care. For these children and their families, timely diagnosis and treatment can be life-changing and in many cases, life-saving. Notably, John F. Kennedy played a pivotal role in the early success of newborn screening. In 1961, 1 year after Robert Guthrie developed the first test for phenylketonuria, or PKU, President Kennedy appointed the Presidential Advisory Commission on Mental Retardation. 1 year later, in 1962, that commission recommended universal newborn screening for all babies born in the United States. And over 60 years later, 3.6 million babies are screened for upwards of 40 disorders each year. And without federal leadership and partnership, we are now going back in time. Disorders like MLD and DMD were on the precipice, as you heard, of RUSP review. To be possibly screened by states across the country have now left future babies in limbo. We are now back where we started the century, in a time where a baby can live in one state that screens for a disease, but be born in a border state that does not screen for a disease. And that simple accident of geography can mean the difference between life and death. So with that, I present to you the portions of the NASEM report that we believe provide a roadmap for policymakers in these dynamic times. First, some background about the task and the process of developing the report. The committee was tasked with examining the current landscape of newborn screening, with then recommending options to strengthen public health newborn screening, and then establishing a vision for the future. There were 14 members with expertise across multiple domains: newborn screening, state and federal public health, lived and parental experience, bioethics, legal, existing and emerging technologies, health systems, health economics, and clinical care. And through this process, all reviewed literature, held public workshops and webinars, and received input from over 600 people across newborn screening through public engagement activities. This process involved over a year of deliberations about the path forward for public health newborn screening, and the committee identified several key messages and recommendations that are highlighted in that report, and are directed at various newborn screening partners and actors on the federal state level, including programs, professional societies, healthcare providers, funders, researchers, and others. To be clear, newborn screening is a vital public health service and an unequivocal public health success, with a simple mission to reduce illness and death in infants by identifying serious conditions early. But making that promise a reality means more than just identifying conditions that merit screening, which is in itself a critical task that was performed by the now terminated ACHDNC. It also requires excellence in how we deliver screening across all 56 states and territorial programs that run newborn screening services. These programs operate as part of a federated system, meaning each one follows its own process and local rules. Therefore, national and federal leadership will be key to keeping programs aligned, adapting successfully to new challenges, and driving continuous improvement. And with that, I'll point you to 3 of our recommendations. The report puts forward a vision for greater national coordination in newborn screening without losing sight of the importance of state and territorial autonomy. To achieve this, we recommend that the Department of Health and Human Services take the lead in bringing together critical partners around a shared set of goals, including enhancing alignment across the many programs and efforts already in place, clarifying who's responsible for what, and supporting excellence now and into the future. And as part of that role, HHS should develop and carry out a 10-year strategic plan grounded in this report's recommendations. And whatever structure is used to drive this work forward must come with the authority, accountability, and resources necessary to actualize this vision. Key challenges facing programs can be best addressed through national coordination and leadership, including collecting data to inform continuous improvement and resource and expertise sharing among those programs. As you can see, advancing excellence for public health newborn screening, this is recommendation 2, will require the voices and expertise of individuals and groups across newborn screening, public health leaders, families, providers, researchers, advocates, state leaders, among others. That's why the report also recommends establishing a dedicated advisory body responsible for identifying major challenges, surfacing solutions, and informing the development and implementation of the strategic plan. With this input, national leadership would be better equipped to act, and partners across the system will be better able to see their role moving newborn screening forward. And as we've heard, in 2010, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services began providing national guidance to states through the RUSP, or the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel. And while this framework helped promote consistency, the current process for adding the new conditions to the panel remained lengthy and complex, taking an average of 3 to 4 years. As others have noted, this timeline doesn't account for additional time states need to implement screening once a condition is established. And often the burden of advancing a new screening opportunity, as you have seen here, falls upon advocacy organizations, which must work to generate both attention and funding. The committee affirmed that the RUSP is an essential source of national evidence-based guidance that promotes consistency across programs. We recommend that HHS, along with these state and territorial programs, take meaningful steps to improve the process for adding conditions to the RUSP and ultimately panels. Specifically, HHS should establish a committee focused on ongoing RUSP guidance. In addition to reviewing conditions for inclusion, the group would proactively evaluate potential conditions for inclusion and identify key research gaps. To support this, HHS should also enhance its scientific and technical infrastructure for evidence review and explore the use of rapid review mechanisms. And finally, evidence is essential to informed decision-making about newborn screening as a public health service. Advances in science and technology can offer opportunities to improve public health through newborn screening. As new therapies are discovered, more conditions may become treatable, and technological advancements can make it feasible or cost-effective to detect more conditions. However, gaps in research focus, approaches, and structures can limit the relevance of research findings to decision-making. Therefore, a national plan with associated research infrastructure would help ensure that research informing newborn screening is more strategic, coordinated, nimble, and sufficiently resourced to provide the evidence needed to adapt to a rapidly changing landscape. In closing, newborn screening depends on a vast array of efforts and partners across sectors of both professional and lived experience. Everyone can play a role in taking the report's recommendations forward. Our federal partners are critical to ensuring that we can create a sustainable and thriving program for newborn screening of the 21st century through supporting national and federal leadership, ensuring we have the infrastructure and the funding to close the gaps in rare disease screening, diagnosis, and treatment. Thank you.
Thank you again, Dr. Carini, for that fantastic presentation and for your work on that authoring committee. I know we are at time, but I'm taking a little bit moderator prerogative for one quick fire question. Just because we've heard from our speakers such great stories and learning more about newborn screening, we've also heard about the current imperative to do more within this space. And so as a quick fire question, just one for each of our panelists. As experts in your field within newborn screening, what is one thing that you would hope Secretary Kennedy and members of Congress and individuals here today would take away from your comments today? What do you hope that they go home with today, learning about and thinking about for newborn screening? And if anyone wants to jump in, perfect.
Well, number one, I would say to Secretary Kennedy that newborn screening saves lives. And with Duchenne, it has the opportunity to extend lives and make a meaningful difference for our patients. And every single child with Duchenne or any other disease deserves that chance. So thank you for your consideration.
And I'll just add to Chris's, newborn screening will save parents the heartache of, that unknown, that questioning, when you know something is wrong and you just don't know what to do. And it would just really save parents that heartache and that stress of feeling helpless.
In addition to those comments, I would just urge immediate action. We don't have time to wait. We don't have 1 or 2 years to wait for the administration to come up with a new mechanism. We need something now because time is muscle, time is myelin in our case, time is death. And so we really need something to happen right now.
And I think, what I've seen from Secretary Kennedy is that he's listening. And when he realizes that maybe they made a mistake, that they'll go back and fix that mistake. And so I think by creating awareness of what the advisory committee did and what newborn screening does for pennies on the dollar, we're these very complex diseases, we're screening early, pre-symptomatically, we're giving these families, and often, as you heard, the older sibling passed away, the younger sibling was saved with this amazing gene therapy. We don't have that anymore. We're letting families or having families have 2, 3, 4, 5 children who are born without these diseases or with a treatment early for these diseases. So I just think getting this word out that, we hope they will reconsider and act right away.
I would piggyback on that to say the ACT-DUNC is not just a committee. It has committee in its name. But I like to make the analogy to an orchestra. And the ACT-DUNC was the conductor. And when you remove the conductor from the orchestra will play for a little while longer together, but eventually things will start to fall apart. It's not, people will not be on time, instruments will be out of tune, and eventually you will lose what you had as an orchestra. So the conductor or the ACHDNC or the federal leadership is really not to be underestimated in the structure and guidance that is provided.
Ditto. All that, and just to say, I don't want MLD to be the last disease to go through this process. I don't want DMD to be the last disease that goes through this process. We just heard about KJ Muldoon, the little boy who was treated at birth for a rare mutation using the same team that took care of my late daughter at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And everyone is celebrating that achievement. And I want to remind everyone who's celebrating this new medicine that it cannot happen without this work, that when it succeeds, occurs like a quietly whirring machine that you don't even have to think about. You don't notice your refrigerator until it stops working. You will not notice the crisis in the healthcare system until children are dying. And the people in this room have to tell families that the reason their kid is dying is not because this was a preventable tragedy that was beyond your control. Now you're going to burden these families with the diagnosis that our leadership did not act when they could, and that is a whole different moral calculus and makes us all responsible in a new way. So I would urge Secretary Kennedy to act as quickly as possible.
I appreciate everyone giving fantastic answers, so I won't build too much on it. So again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. Thank you for listening. Thank you to our panelists again for being here and talking about newborn screening and the importance of protecting, restoring, and expanding the newborn screening program to ensure the fact that it remains one of the most successful public health programs in the country, because it has been and has often been considered, but to the final point, that was not by accident. That happens through action, and we need to continue to work, continue to maintain, continue to grow this program, and continue to act to ensure the fact that it remains one of the most successful public health programs in this country. Thank you guys so much. Have a great day. Thank you guys so much. That was fantastic. Thank you guys so much. That was absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Great presentation.